The lights of the studio gleamed like interrogation lamps, every angle designed to expose, to magnify. Sarah Palin leaned forward with a smirk that was half grin, half dagger. Her voice, practiced in cruelty, cut through the chatter, a jab at Jasmine Crockett's hair, her clothes, her very presence. The words weren't clever, but they were barbed enough to draw a ripple of laughter from the panel. The chuckles spread, shallow and smug, like a wave of complicity washing over the room. And then came the pause. The laughter lingered awkwardly, echoing louder than it should have, bouncing off the walls of a country too familiar with this spectacle. A woman of color on stage, her brilliance reduced to the shape of her curls, the cut of her jacket. Cameras tilted, searching for Crockett's reaction, hungry for humiliation, expecting the downward gaze, the nervous smile, the retreat. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her face was stone, carved from the weight of generations who had endured this exact theater. Eyes steady, lips pressed, the silence around her thickened. The smirk on Palin's face widened for a second as if she believed she had won. But the silence was not surrender. It was the tightening of a bowstring before release. Viewers at home shifted forward in their seats. Something was different. The sneer that Palin delivered with such confidence now seemed to hang in the air, heavy, exposed. This was no longer about style or performance. It was about power. And in the stillness of that moment, power began to change hands. Narrator, in that moment, the room thought she would shrink. They thought she would laugh it off, smooth it over, and play the part assigned to her. Instead, Jasmine Crockett was about to deliver a response that would not just silence Sarah Palin, but leave the entire studio stunned. For every chuckle that had filled the air seconds earlier, a reckoning was waiting. A reckoning born of a lifetime of underestimation, sharpened into words that would pierce deeper than any insult. But this wasn't the first time Sarah Palin underestimated someone, and it wouldn't be the last. Sarah Palin had built her public persona on a familiar act, the cutting one-liner, the mocking smile, the performance of folksy cruelty dressed as charm. For years, she carved out space in the media not by offering substance, but by turning ridicule into currency. She knew the power of belittlement, how to turn a room with a laugh at someone else's expense, and time and again it worked. Audiences leaned into the theater of derision, never pausing to ask what such cheap shots cost those on the receiving end. But this night, something in the air was different, because Palin's barb at Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another dig. It was part of a long, ugly tradition. Women in politics being reduced to their appearance rather than their intellect, their hair and clothes dissected, while their ideas were ignored. Crockett wasn't just standing in that studio as one person. She was standing as the latest in a long line of women asked to fight battles no man would ever be forced to fight. Every woman who had been dismissed with a smirk, every leader overshadowed by whispers about their look, every professional undermined by gossip instead of respected for their grit. They were all in that studio with her. The laughter at Palin's joke may have sounded like background noise to some, but to Crockett's supporters, it rang like a siren, the system exposing itself once again. The history was undeniable. Shirley Chisholm, the first black woman elected to Congress, endured constant commentary on her unpolished style, as though substance mattered less than polish. Maxine Waters, still serving today, has been mocked relentlessly for her tone, her passion, her refusal to smile on command. The pattern has always been the same: diminish the woman, question her authority, make her seem small enough to ignore. And for women of color, the burden has been doubled, facing both racism and sexism in the same cutting blow. So when Palin sneered, it wasn't just Palin sneering. It was decades of dismissal taking another swing, and that is why silence fell heavy after her words. The audience could laugh if they wanted, but they could not escape the weight of what it meant. Because it wasn't just a joke. It was a reminder that power in America too often comes at the expense of women forced to defend their dignity before they can even present their ideas. The narrator's voice cuts in, low and deliberate, every insult, every laugh, every eye. Roll wasn't just at her. It was at all of us. And in that realization, the stakes crystallized. This wasn't merely a moment of personal insult. It was a crossroads, where one woman's refusal to shrink could stand as a defiance for millions who had been told to shrink before. Sarah Palin thought she had control of the stage, but Jasmine Crockett knew better. She knew that the very mockery meant to disarm her had given her the perfect opening. And so Crockett chose her moment. The laughter had not yet finished echoing when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady enough to slice through the noise. She didn't raise her tone. She didn't match Palin's smirk. Instead, she spoke with a calm so deliberate it felt like the studio lights dimmed around her. Sarah, she began, pausing just long enough to reclaim the air in the room. It must be exhausting to spend your career talking about everything but ideas. The chuckles choked into silence. Palin blinked, her grin frozen in place. Crockett pressed on, her cadence sharp, each word clicking like a lock opening. You came here to mock my appearance, my hair, my clothes, my face, and yet not one word about the people struggling outside the studio. Not one word about policies that matter. That tells us everything we need to know about what you stand for. A ripple moved through the audience. Not laughter now, but recognition. The weight of her words hung heavy. Palin's confidence faltered as she shifted in her chair, trying to wave it off, but Crockett wasn't done. You want to reduce me to a joke, Sarah? Then let me remind you, jokes don't pass laws. Jokes don't defend democracy. Jokes don't show up for their constituents when their lights are out, their water is dirty, their paychecks are short. Leaders do. And I am a leader. What are you? The room froze. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was electric. Palin's eyes darted toward the cameras, toward the producers frantically gesturing behind the glass, trying to control a moment already out of their grasp. Crockett's tone remained measured, but every word landed like a hammer. You spent years being praised for your charisma while avoiding accountability. But charisma doesn't build schools. Charisma doesn't fix healthcare. Charisma doesn't put food on the table. My ideas do. My record does. And I will never apologize for showing up as myself, hair, clothes, and all, because my work speaks louder than any insult you can hurl. A gasp broke from somewhere in the crowd, followed by scattered applause. Palin's practiced smile collapsed into a tight line. She opened her mouth to respond, but Crockett raised her voice just slightly, not to shout, but to finish with finality. And one last thing, every time you or anyone else tries to make me small, remember this? You only prove how large my presence truly is, because the only way you can think to compete with me is by attacking what you see, not what I say. That's your weakness, not mine. The applause spread now, hesitant at first, then swelling as the audience realized they had just witnessed something that cut through the artifice of television. Palin's face flushed, her eyes narrowing, but there was no recovering. Her smirk was gone, replaced with the unmistakable look of someone who had underestimated her opponent and paid dearly for it. The narrator's voice broke through, heavy with gravity. What she said in those 30 seconds will be replayed for decades. Because in that half minute, Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, she had dismantled the very playbook Palin built her career on. Calm, sharp, surgical, she flipped mockery into indictment, condescension into clarity, and for the first time in the segment, all eyes belonged to her. The producers behind the glass scrambled, shuffling papers, whispering urgently into headsets. But nothing could soften the blow that had already landed. Palin tried to adjust in her chair, feigning composure, but the damage was visible. The audience could see it. The country would soon see it. And yet, as powerful as those words were, their true force wasn't just in the clapback itself. No. The shockwave was only beginning to spread, but the true power of her words would come from what followed. Sarah Palin let out a shaky laugh, the kind meant to sound dismissive, but quivered just enough to betray unease. She tossed her hair back, searching for the swagger that had carried her through countless interviews. Oh, lighten up. She muttered, hoping the audience would rally with her, that the joke might still land if she forced it hard enough. But the sound fell flat. The same crowd that had chuckled moments earlier now sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between the two women as if witnessing a shift in gravity. Palin's smile faltered. She leaned back in her chair, glancing sideways at the panelists. One cleared his throat nervously, shuffling papers. Another forced a grin, eager to move the segment along but unable to find the words. The split screen told the story more vividly than any narration could. Palin's face tightening, composed and unyielding, the panel caught in a nervous shuffle somewhere in between. The tension was thick, unrelenting, and for once, Palin wasn't the one directing it. Then came the first flicker of applause from the audience, not loud, not yet, but enough to break the room spell. It spread, uncertain at first, then gaining strength as more hands joined in. Palin's lips pressed thin. She tried again to laugh, but now it was the laughter of someone cornered, not in control. Crockett remained steady, the calm in the storm, her silence more powerful than Palin's scrambling words. Behind the glass, producers scrambled, their voices sharp over headsets. Cut to commercial. Stay with the split screen. The moment had already slipped beyond their control. One thing was certain, the clip was already gone, captured, clipped, and shared before the broadcast even finished. And sure enough, within minutes, the outside world began to roar. On CNN, anchors replayed Crockett's words with wide eyes, dissecting her precision like surgeons marveling at the cleanest cut they'd ever seen. Fox News hosts scrambled for framing, some mocking Crockett as too sensitive, others conceding Palin looked unsteady. MSNBC plastered the clip on a loop, each replay met with growing awe. But the real explosion wasn't on television, it was online. Twitter lit up like wildfire. Hashtags bearing Crockett's name shot to the top within the hour. Side by side, Jeff spread, Palin's sneer dissolving into unease against Crockett's unflinching stare. Memes declared, "Don't mess with Jasmine." Activists called her response a masterclass in dignity. Even late night comedians dropped their scheduled monologues to riff on the takedown that was impossible to ignore. And in living rooms across America, ordinary people felt something visceral. For black women long reduced to caricatures, the clapback was more than entertainment. It was validation. For immigrants told to soften their accents, to change their names, to adjust their appearances just to be accepted, Crockett's refusal to bend was inspiration. For progressives wary of watching leaders swallowed by mockery and noise, her poise was a reminder substance could still triumph over spectacle. The collective cheer wasn't loud in one place. It was dispersed, multiplied across screens, living rooms, text threads, and community centers. People leaned in, replayed the moment, sent it to friends with captions like, "Watch this." Finally, Palin, meanwhile, faded into the background of her own stage. Her attempts to recover came off as defensive, her laughter brittle. What once seemed like her greatest strength, the ability to mock and control with charm, now looked hollow. She had faced someone unwilling to play the game on her terms, and in that refusal, Palin's performance cracked open. The narrator's voice cut in, carrying the weight of inevitability. Phones lit up, headlines spun, but behind the noise, something deeper shifted, because this wasn't only about one insult, one response, one televised clash. It was about the tectonic plates of power moving, the story of who gets to define strength in America beginning to change in real time. And to understand why Crockett's words cut so deep, you need to know the history. Sarah Palin's rise was never about policy. It was performance. From the moment she stepped into the national spotlight, she wielded a unique kind of charisma. The grin laced with mockery, the wink meant to disguise a dagger. Her folksy derision made her a darling to some, a symbol of authenticity. But authenticity built on belittlement has its limits. Her talent wasn't in ideas or solutions. It was in cutting others down with a smile, turning cruelty into entertainment. For years, that brand worked. Palin could dismiss opponents with a quip about their appearance, their education, even their intelligence, and the crowd would laugh. The media enabled it, treating her ridicule as a kind of theater rather than the corrosive force it was. And behind her success lay an unspoken truth. America has always made room for women like Palin, women whose power is granted when they punch down. But for women of color, the rules have always been different. History is heavy with examples of leaders mocked not for their failures, but for daring to exist in spaces reserved for others. Shirley Chisholm was ridiculed for her clothes, her voice, her refusal to act polished, even as she broke barriers as the first black woman in Congress. Barbara Jordan, a voice of thunder in the Watergate hearings, was caricatured for her tone and physical presence rather than praised for her brilliance. Maxine Waters has been dismissed as angry more times than her legislative record has been recognized. The playbook is old, its pages dog-eared. Reduce them to their looks, laugh at their hair, roll eyes at their passion, undermine their seriousness by framing them as spectacles instead of stateswomen. The cruelty is never new, only recycled. Jasmine Crockett knew this history because she had lived it in miniature long before Palin ever spoke her name. Long before cameras and bright lights, Crockett cut her teeth in the courtroom. A lawyer by training, she learned quickly that being underestimated was both obstacle and weapon. Judges doubted her. Opponents sneered at her youth, her voice, her style. But time and again, she dismantled them with precision, turning underestimation into opportunity. She was not born into power. She fought for every inch of it. From grassroots organizing to legislative battles, Crockett carried the scars of underestimation like armor. Each smirk she endured, each insult she absorbed, became part of her rhythm. So when Palin mocked her on that stage, Crockett was not blindsided. She was prepared. This was the fight she had been training for her entire career. The silence that followed Palin's jab wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. Crockett understood that every camera, every microphone, every viewer at home would remember her next words more than anything else said that night. For her, this wasn't about trading insults. It was about reframing the narrative that had trapped women like her for generations. Narrator for Crockett, this wasn't a clapback. It was a lifetime of battles distilled into one moment. And in delivering that moment, Crockett wasn't merely defending herself. She was reaching across history, linking her voice to every woman who had been told she was too loud, too unpolished, too different to belong. She knew that by standing tall, she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for all of them. And so she didn't just defend herself. She turned the tables. The room still buzzed with the aftershock of Crockett's words when she leaned in again. This time with deliberate precision, her gaze stayed locked on Palin, but her voice carried outward to the audience in the studio and the millions beyond the cameras. You want to talk about appearance? Sarah. Crockett began, calm and sharp. Let's talk about the appearance of your record. Because when people look at it closely, what they see isn't strength. They see failure. The audience shifted, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Palin's smirk wavered, her eyes flicking toward the panel for support. None came. Crockett pressed forward, her words unhurried but unrelenting. When you had the chance to lead, what did you do? You quit your job as governor halfway through. When you had the chance to build something for your state, you chased book deals and TV gigs. You didn't lift people up, you lifted yourself. The sting of the indictment landed harder than any personal insult could have. Palin opened her mouth, but Crockett cut in, her voice gaining strength. And let's be clear, charisma without accountability isn't leadership. It's entertainment. And people are tired of being entertained while their families struggle. They're tired of leaders who crack jokes while schools crumble, while hospitals overflow, while women's rights are stripped away. You stand here mocking my hair while our democracy is in crisis. That's not strength, Sarah. That's cowardice. The silence in the room deep and heavy and undeniable. Even the panelists avoided Palin's eyes now. One scribbled notes furiously. Another stared at the desk, unwilling to get caught in the wreckage. Crockett's tone shifted, steady and deliberate. You belittle me because you think that's what power looks like. But power isn't in a smirk. Power isn't in a laugh at someone else's expense. Power is in showing up for people who can't fight for themselves. Power is in policy, in action, in truth. And when we compare what you've offered to what I've done, the contrast speaks for itself. She listed them out, not with arrogance, but with clarity. Her work on voting rights, on economic justice, on healthcare access. Each point landed like a stone on the scale, tipping it further out of Palin's hands. The narrator's voice cut in over the imagery, measured and graved. The laughter died. What replaced it was silence. The audience knew it. The panelists knew it. Palin knew it. The balance of the room had shifted. The power that had once belonged to Palin's stagecraft now resided in Crockett's unflinching words. Palin tried to laugh again, but the sound came out brittle, the charm gone. "Oh, come on," she said, forcing lightness into her voice. "You don't know what you're talking about." But the words hung hollow, because the truth had already landed, and no laugh track could erase it. Crockett turned slightly, opening her body toward the audience. She wasn't speaking only to Palin anymore. She was speaking to the people who had watched women like her get torn down for years. "You all saw what happened tonight," she said, her tone rising just enough to carry. "You saw how quick the joke came. You saw how fast the room laughed. But let me tell you, I'm not here to be laughed at. I'm here to fight for every person who has ever been told they don't belong. And if the best my opponents can do is mock my appearance, then it proves they have nothing left to offer." The applause erupted stronger this time, rolling through the studio with force. Palin sat stiff in her chair, her eyes narrowed, her hands clasped tightly together. Crockett finished with a line that cut through the noise like a blade. Because here's the truth. If all you've got are insults, then you've already lost the debate. The cheer that followed was thunderous. The cameras captured Palin shrinking into the background of her own show, her once commanding presence eclipsed by the very person she tried to diminish. The narrator's voice returned, solemn but charged, but Crockett's victory wasn't about her. It was about all of us. The clash between Sarah Palin and Jasmine Crockett may have unfolded in a brightly lit studio, but its reverberations stretched far beyond those walls. Because this wasn't just about a personal jab or even a political sparring match. It was about something older, heavier, and far more insidious, the way America treats women in power, especially women of color. For decades, politics has disguised its prejudice as humor. From the smirk of a moderator to the laughter of a panel, the message has been consistent: women don't belong unless they're ornamental, agreeable, or silent. And when a woman of color dares to rise, the mockery intensifies. The double bind sharpens. Too strong, and she's angry. Too poised, and she's cold. Too stylish, and she's distracting. Too plain, and she's unfit. The target keeps moving, but the intent remains the same: to reduce her from a leader into a caricature. Palin's insult was not new. It was familiar, almost rehearsed. The snickers it sparked revealed a muscle memory of disrespect. But Crockett's refusal to flinch, her decision to meet derision with dignity and substance, turned the script on its head. In that moment, she wasn't just defending herself. She was exposing the systemic rot beneath the laugh track. Consider the echoes. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was told by a congressman to learn her place, she didn't bow. She delivered a floor speech that became a generational rallying cry. When Kamala Harris was interrupted during Senate hearings, she didn't retreat. She sharpened her questions until even her critics admitted her mastery. Each of these women bore the weight of centuries of exclusion, yet each refused to play by the rules of diminishment. Crockett's response joined that lineage. And here is the truth: the media has been complicit. Too often, producers lean into the spectacle of ridicule because it plays well on camera. A woman's laughable moment becomes a viral clip, while her substantive policy arguments are buried. The cycle is vicious, reinforcing stereotypes while starving the public of meaningful discourse. Palin's jab was not just hers. It was a reflection of the system that enables and rewards such behavior. The narrator's voice cuts in, heavy with resonance. This wasn't just a studio spat. It was America in microcosm. The nation is still deciding what it values. Does it want leaders who mock or leaders who build? Does it reward derision or dignity? Crockett's performance forced that choice into the open, and millions watching at home felt it viscerally. Because every woman who has been laughed at in a meeting, every immigrant who has been mocked for their accent, every black woman who has been judged more for her hair than her work, they all saw themselves in that moment. What happened in that studio was more than clapback. It was reclamation. It was a reminder that ridicule cannot erase resilience, and that mockery cannot silence truth. Crockett didn't just turn the tables on Palin, she revealed the crookedness of the table itself. And as the clip ricocheted across networks and timelines, the symbolism deepened. This was no longer about Crockett versus Palin. It was about a culture deciding whether it will keep laughing at women who demand power or finally listen to them. The applause in that studio may have faded, but in living rooms, classrooms, and offices across the country, something stuck. A question lingered. A shift began. Narrator, which made what happened next a defining moment. Sarah Palin, who once thrived on quick quips and dismissive charm, now looked cornered. Her voice, once confident, had thinned into nervous laughter. Every attempt to pivot back to humor fell flat. Each smirk she offered seemed more like a mask slipping than a weapon sharpening. She had always counted on the audience to join her, to amplify her punchlines with knowing chuckles. But tonight, the studio wasn't laughing anymore. Jasmine Crockett sensed it. She didn't gloat, didn't rush. Instead, she allowed the silence to breathe, let the weight of Palin's unraveling fill the air. Then she leaned in, steady, deliberate, almost surgical. You see, Sarah, Crockett began, her voice calm, but edged with steel. This was never about me. This was about values. You mocked my appearance because you thought it was the easy thing to do. But leadership isn't about appearances. It isn't about vanity or clever one-liners or knowing how to smirk at the right camera. Leadership is about values, all. And when I measure your record against mine, when I measure it against the needs of the people, it's clear values win every single time. The words landed like thunder, not because they were shouted, but because they were undeniable. Palin shifted in her seat, searching for a retort, but found none. Crockett pressed on, her voice resonant now, reaching into every corner of the studio. Oh, I represent communities who have been ignored, laughed at, told they don't belong. And every time I step onto a stage like this, I carry them with me. So when you laugh at me, you're not just laughing at Jasmine Crockett. You're laughing at the millions of people who refuse to be silenced anymore. And I won't let you or anyone laugh them out of their power. For the first time all night, the audience didn't cheer immediately. They didn't clap, didn't whistle, didn't shout. They sat in stunned silence, absorbing the gravity of her words. The stillness itself was louder than applause. Respect had replaced ridicule. Palin's carefully crafted image, the folksy provocateur, the quick-witted firebrand, crumbled under the weight of Crockett's clarity. She had nowhere to go. Every escape hatch was sealed. The smirk, the snicker, the one-liner, none could withstand the force of values anchored in truth. The narrator's voice rose, cinematic, echoing the gravity of the moment. In one exchange, Crockett shattered decades of a narrative that power belongs to mockery. She proved it belongs to truth. The studio seemed transformed. What had begun as a space of derision now felt reverent. What had been a stage for entertainment now became a platform for reckoning. The shift was not subtle. It was seismic. Palin's face told the story more clearly than words. The spark was gone. The swagger was gone. For once, the former governor had no punchline left. She looked, for the first time in the segment, small. And Crockett, poised, unwavering, delivered the closing line that would echo beyond the cameras. At the end of the day, it's not the loudest voice that wins. It's the truest one. The eruption came not in laughter, but in something far more powerful: respect. Applause rolled through the studio, not chaotic, but deliberate, almost solemn. People weren't clapping at a show. They were applauding a truth they knew had been long overdue. Crockett leaned back in her chair, not triumphant, but steady, as if to say, this wasn't victory for me. It was victory for all of us who've ever been dismissed. The narrator's voice softened, carrying the audience toward the next chapter, but her message wasn't just for Palin. It was for us. Sarah Palin may have mocked Jasmine Crockett's appearance, but what happened next transformed the stage itself. What began as a cheap shot meant to belittle became the spark for a defining moment, a reminder that mockery crumbles in the face of courage and vanity shrinks beside values. Crockett didn't just defend herself. She redefined the terms of the debate. With dignity, with substance, with unshakable composure, she proved that power isn't found in insults or laughter. It's found in truth. And in doing so, she reminded every viewer of a lesson that transcends politics. When someone tries to diminish you, the most powerful response isn't anger, and it isn't silence. The most powerful response is truth spoken with clarity and conviction. Think about what that means. It means that no sneer, no smirk, no insult can erase your worth. It means that when people mock what you look like, they reveal the weakness of their own ideas. And it means that dignity, real dignity, will always outlast derision. Crockett's stand wasn't just for her. It was for every person who has been laughed at, underestimated, or told they don't belong. She turned that laughter into a lesson, that smirk into a symbol, and that moment into a movement. Now, it's honest. Don't just watch this story. Be part of it. Subscribe, share, and amplify voices like Crockett's. Because the fight for truth over mockery, for values over vanity, isn't won in a single moment. It's won every time we choose to stand with those who stand tall. This is more than politics. This is about who we are and who we're willing to become.